Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Borderline Obsessive Pinball Restoration Sensation Series. I wonder if I should start calling it that now. Well, in this video, we are going to be doing part 2 of the Williams Pinbot pinball machine restoration. We're going to do some more detailed work in the back box. We'll take a look at the electronics and see if anything needs to be done. And we will start working on the playfield and restoring everything and getting it all cleaned up. So let's get started. So what I want to do first is replace the LEDs in the back box because right now they're just all cool white LEDs and it looks fine, but I want to make it a little more colorful than what it looks like now. Because the LEDs in my machines are all Comet Pinball LEDs because those have given me the best results. And I can tell that the lights in this machine are not Comet Pinball. They don't say that on the actual LED. Plus I noticed that some of these LEDs, they seem to get a little hot and then they dim over time, and I don't notice that with the Comet Pinball ones. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap all these out and make it look a little bit nicer. So let's see what this looks like with the back glass on. And there we go. I think that looks quite a bit better. This is kind of similar to how I color-coded the Pinbot that I used to have, so it's kind of cool seeing it look like that again. So before we start working on the playfield, the first thing I want to do is pull out each of these boards and just give them a visual inspection because I have noticed a few problems related to the MPU board. On some of the switches on the playfield, they aren't detected all the time. Like, for example, the left ramp, sometimes it'll try to close itself multiple times. And for the visor, it will keep going open, closed, because the machine isn't detecting the switch that tells it that the visor is closed. So that might be a loose connection on the Rotten Dog board. So I want to pull each of these out, just check for loose connections, check the capacitors and make sure they're okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll take a look at each of these boards. All right, here is our first board. This is the flipper power supply board, and this is an original Williams board with a matching game number and serial number to this machine. So it is original. The only things that are on it are a bridge rectifier, and this converts the AC coming from the transformer into DC so that the flippers can operate with DC power. We have a fuse, a couple capacitors, a diode, and a resistor, and that's it. And I imagine this board must be used in different configurations because there's a whole bunch of things that are unpopulated. So other games must have different use cases for these boards where they have more components on them. So that's kind of interesting. And if we take a look at the back, you can see that this board is completely untouched. No one has ever worked on it before. It is still using all of its original parts. And if we take a look close at the solder connections, you can see they still look really nice. None of them have any cracks or cold joints. And the main way you'd be able to tell is there'd be a little ring around the solder joint if it's gone cold. And so if you see that, then you have to reflow it. But I don't see that anywhere on any of the connections on this board. They all still look perfect. So this board doesn't need anything. It just needs a cleaning because it is pretty dirty and dusty. So I'll clean it off, but it doesn't need any service. I will go ahead and check the ESR on this capacitor just to see if it's okay, and if it's not, then I'll test it for leakage. But since the flippers are working fine, I imagine the capacitor is okay. So I think this board has a clean bill of health. Here's the power supply, and this is also the original Williams power supply. It looks like it's in good condition. And if I flip it over to the back, you can see that all the solder connections look good. I do see some rework on some of the pads, but I've looked at where those go, and those are all of the capacitor leads. So this power supply has been recapped, and I think all of the boards in this machine that are original have also been recapped. So I don't need to go through and test the caps on this board. And since this power supply is working, really the only thing I need to do is just clean it up and make sure that the fuses are the correct values, and then it's pretty much good to go, because I've looked at the connector pads and none of them have any cracked solder joints. They all look perfectly fine. So this power supply is also in very good shape. And I went ahead and pulled out the MPU board just to look at it, but as you would expect for a replacement CPU board, it looks absolutely perfect, including the little daughter board. So everything there is just fine. So I went ahead and removed each of the displays, and these are modern PinScore LED displays, and they also have a PinScore LED display driver board that replaces the original one. And I took a look at those, and of course they look absolutely fine because they're modern boards. They're not really going to have any issues. The cables, on the other hand, are kind of disgusting. I think these two are replacement cables that are used specifically by these type of displays, but this one and that one here are absolutely original, and they are disgusting. So I'm going to have to clean those up. But the main reason I wanted to remove these displays is because on the Player 2 display, which was mounted here, one of the clips that held it in is broken. And so when the display was mounted here, it would kind of sag a little bit on this side, and so you weren't able to see the whole thing when the back glass was on, and I wanted to fix that. So I took one of these clips out from the Player 4, I took that one out, just so I could get the measurements, and I 3D printed a new one. This is the new one here. Here's what the original looks like, and if I put this one side by side, you can see that's pretty spot on. I had to modify someone else's file that this middle section here was a little bit too short, and so I changed it just so it would be a little bit longer, and it matches up pretty much perfectly with the original clip. And I know it's not going to be as durable as a original plastic clip, but it should do the job and hold this display in straight. So I'm going to try to get that in there without it breaking, and we'll see if it's able to hold the display in. So how these clips are mounted is they are friction fit into little holes in the backboard. So to remove the broken one, since I don't care about it because it's broken, I'm going to use a nail set and a hammer, and it should just pop out. You know what? I think that is going to work. And yes, that is much better. You can actually see the bottom segments on the Player 2 display now. So that new clip fixed that problem. But there's still one more board-related problem that I want to address, and that is the loud hum coming out of the speakers whenever this game is running. So I'm going to put the microphone up to the speaker so you can hear the hum. So you should be able to hear that. And that hum does not disappear when you have the volume all the way down or when the machine's just sitting silent doing nothing. And it's not the normal level of hum. And I'm going to show you the difference. So what I'm going to do over here, yes, we will at some point get to that machine, but I'm going to turn the PinBot off, and I'm going to turn on the big guns because this is also a System 11A machine. And you can hear the difference in the hum on this game. See, it's noticeably quieter. So what I think's going on is the capacitors on the PinBot soundboard need to be replaced. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out that soundboard again, and I'll show you what I found when looking at that board again. So when I pulled out the soundboard in the first video, I took a look at it and noticed that it had been recapped because all of the solder pads where the capacitors are have solder flux residue marks, and I can tell that these electrolytics are not original, so those have been replaced. But after looking at it some more now, I've noticed that these blue capacitors, these are original capacitors that Williams installed, and so these have not been replaced yet. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrolytics have, but I looked at the date codes on them, and they're either from 1998 or 1995. So yes, this board was recapped, but it was done almost 30 years ago. So it's probably time for this board to receive a recap again, replace all of these old electrolytics and replace all of these original blue electrolytic capacitors, because I was testing them with my capacitor wizard, which is an in-circuit ESR tester. And when I do the electrolytics, they test great. Very low ESR on each one. But when I test one of those blue capacitors, I'll just do this one right here, you can see it's a little weak, and I compared it to a new one, and it should be around 1 ohm, and these are measuring around 3 to 5 ohms. So all of those blue capacitors are definitely a little tired, and so what I'm going to do is replace all the electrolytics except for these two, because I don't have them in my part stash, but these test just fine, so I'm going to leave these two, but I'm going to replace these 4 here. I think these are filter capacitors for the 2 amplifiers here. Replace this one and replace all of these blue ones, and that hopefully should get rid of our hum, and it may even fix the distorted sound issue too, because Pinbot can either generate sounds through the section on the MPU board or from the sound ROM on this board. So I'm going to replace those caps, and then we'll see what it sounds like in the machine. And that's what it looks like after it's been recapped. So I replaced the 4 larger electrolytics here, as well as the 5 smaller ones in those spots. And it's a good thing that I replaced those original blue ones, because I ran them through my leakage tester and every one of them was leaky. And the one that was here was the incorrect value. Someone put a 22 microfarad in there, and it should have been a 10 microfarad. So I went ahead and fixed all that. So I imagine that would fix something. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the machine and see if it gets rid of our hum and our distorted sounds. We still have hum. You can hear it has not changed at all. So that wasn't the problem, but that needed to be done because we had multiple leaking capacitors and one that was the incorrect value. And it didn't end up fixing the distorted sound and speech issue either. So the bad capacitors on the soundboard weren't causing that, but that needed to be done anyway. So the only thing that I think is contributing to the hum and the distorted speech are either a bad capacitor in the power supply, which I don't think there is because they've been replaced before as well, or it could just be a design flaw on the Rotten Dog board that allows the speech to sound kind of weird and lets more hum through past the amplifier into the speaker. And so that's what I think it is. So at some point I will try to track down an original Williams System 11A CPU board, and I'll put that in this game and see how it changes the sound. But as it is right now, it's fine. I just wanted to see if I could fix the problem, but I think it's due to the Rotten Dog board not being designed as it should. So with that, that is everything I wanted to fix up in the back box. I also went ahead and cleaned off the back glass, and it looks a lot better. It was really dirty, and I can tell that the display windows are a lot more clear. It definitely looks better. So at this point, we are now ready to start the playfield and cabinet restoration of this machine. Well, I've taken quite a bit off the playfield now, and let's just say this one's going to be fun. And I don't necessarily mean that in a positive way. Look at how much filth was underneath everything. I think this may be the dirtiest game that I've had to handle, because it is just gross. And that's the thing with buying pinball machines, is they may play really good and a lot of stuff might seem to work, but once you get into the nitty-gritty and start taking everything apart, you're left with this, just all the dirt and grime that's never been cleaned in 40 years. And so this one I think is going to look quite a bit better when I'm done cleaning it up. And you can tell just by some of the stuff I pulled out how filthy it is. It's never been cleaned, and this needed to happen a long time ago, because every post, every plastic, everything I took out of this thing was just gross. So I got my work cut out for me in this one. The only major component I still have to remove is the visor assembly, and the top piece looks like it's only held on by a couple cotter keys on the left and the right side where these brackets are. And if I pull those out, I think I can push these little circular parts inward and then just lift the top piece off, because there's some work I have to do under here as well. And so just removing those allows you to move the top part freely. It's no longer attached to the motor assembly, but it's still on a little hinge, as you can see. And there are two more screws that hold on a little bracket, and then I should be able to remove the whole thing. There we go, perfect. And wouldn't you know it, this piece is also disgusting inside, so good thing I removed it. And this is what I wanted to address right here, this plastic. It's broken where these two screw holes are, and there's a crack starting to form here. And this is a very common plastic to break in a Pinbot. And the Pinbot that I had before this machine, around 10 years ago, the crack, there was a crack here as well, but it went practically all the way through from this screw to this one, and I could take both sides of the plastic and flap them like a butterfly wing. That's how bad it was. This one's not that bad, but it's got a crack around halfway. There's a piece broken back here, and these two screws don't hold it in anymore because it's broken. So this needs to be replaced. I have a new one, and so I'll put that in once we're ready to reassemble the machine. I still need to remove it because we have some dirty rubbers and a couple more pieces I want to remove from underneath that. Wowee, dirty. And if you hold this plastic flat, look how bent and warped it is. So yeah, this needs to go. It's pretty much toast. And comparing my brand new plastic to the one I just pulled out of the machine, can you tell the difference? That's what 40 years will do to a plastic in one of these machines. So that new one is going to look quite a bit better when I end up putting that in. And so with all that removed, you can just tell by the state of the rubbers in this machine that it has not been maintained for a very long time. And another thing I noticed is this captive hole right here, the little plastic eject shield that the ball's supposed to sit in is completely broken. And so the only thing that holds the ball in here when it lands is the switch and the little kicker for the coil assembly in there. Otherwise, the ball would just drop right through. The two in the visor here are perfectly fine. That's what it should look like. So I'm going to have to get a new one of those to fix up that captive hole. So yeah, this is a very filthy machine, and it's going to look so much better when I clean it up. Because this is what most of the rubbers in this machine looked like. They're all yellowed and faded, and they don't stretch back to their circular shape anymore. So either they're original, which is very possible because there are plenty of rubbers that looked exactly like that, or they have just been in here for so long that they no longer stretch to their original shape, and they're all cracked and terrible at this point. So, and the ones that I pulled out from the little posts behind the visor, I mean, look how bad those are. Those were white rubbers at one point. And this one's got like a big chunk out of it missing somewhere right there. So that's what most of the rubbers in this looked like. So that's how you know this machine was not maintained very well throughout its life, at least not in recent years. Well, I didn't expect that to happen today. Good thing I'm in a garage where I can just close it, and so this isn't going to interfere with my filming process. And I can already tell that underneath the apron is going to be a disaster, because look at how much filth is just sitting in there. And I stuck my finger right there, and that's how much dirt is under there. So let me get that off, and we can take a look under here. Yep, just like I thought. 40 years of dirt underneath the apron as well. So now we see the full extent of how much this playfield really needs attention. So let's go ahead and give it some attention. The first thing I want to do, though, is clean up all of these pieces, so that way when I'm done cleaning the playfield, these are already clean and I can just start putting them back on. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with all of this. Well, I was going to start cleaning the ramp, but I flipped it over and I just discovered a new problem. So those little light domes for the flashers, they're supposed to be held on by a couple nuts and screws, and there's a couple little black plastic standoffs underneath. But this one and the one over here, they've just been hot glued into place, and the standoffs are missing, and this one's not even in correctly. You can see the screws are over here. So I don't know why that was ever a problem in the first place. I don't know why you'd ever have to unscrew those unless you were going to clean them. I was able to find 2 of the standoffs inside the machine, but I need 2 more. So I'm going to have to make 2 new ones with some little rubber tubing and then put some locking nuts on them so they don't come off. Well, there's what it looks like after cleaning it up. Major difference. The ramp's actually blue now, because before it was almost black looking. This thing needed a lot of magic erasing to get all that embedded dirt out of it, and I even did a little bit on the stickers here because there was embedded dirt in those, and now they are nice and vibrant looking. I also replaced these 2 little rubbers there, and I also went ahead and fixed the hot glue problem with these little light domes. I've replaced the hot glue with the factory nuts and standoffs, and I was able to find replacement nuts in my stash of nuts and screws, and I was able to find some locking nuts so that these 2 wouldn't come out as easy. And for this one, I was able to cut little pieces out of this rubber tubing that I have to create the 2 missing standoffs that I needed, and so that works just as good as the plastic standoffs like in this one. So now they are screwed in exactly how they should be. I cleaned off the bottom side of the ramp because it was pretty disgusting also, and so now this ramp is absolutely perfect. So now that we finished cleaning up all those pieces, now let's move down to the apron because I still have to take all those pieces off and get every one of those clean. So now you can see what the wood color is supposed to look like. That's what it looks like when it's clean, and the dirt has made it turn almost black. So I'm going to try to get that as clean as I possibly can. But I still want to remove this piece, and I have to open up the playfield to get this one out and at least loosen up this metal piece down here where the two micro switches are, because those are filthy as well. And I see that there's a missing C-clip that's supposed to go right here that holds the little kicker part of the out-hole coil assembly down. You can see I'm just able to move it. I shouldn't be able to do that, so I'll put a clip back on that, but I'm going to take the assembly apart because even though I put a little bit of lubricant inside the joint here, I can feel just by moving it that it's still kind of gummed up. See how it's not coming back like instantly? So I need to take this entire assembly apart and just clean it out because it's got a lot of caked in grease just from sitting and not being cleaned. And you can see all the black caked on grease that's all over the apron pieces. And the pinballs directly touch those pieces. So over time, if you don't clean your machine, that's just going to get worse and worse, and the pinballs will start to spread that all around the play field until it looks about like this, all filthy and crusty looking. So all that will get fixed, and this thing is going to look a lot better. All right, it is at this point in the video where the borderline obsessive part of it comes to fruition. So you can see I've removed both the coin door and the playfield. And the reason for that is I have a couple things I need to address, and it would be easier to do with the playfield out. But also because the inside of this machine is so filthy, it's just going to need major attention. It'd be a lot easier to clean if the playfield was just out of my way. You can see the whole bottom of the cabinet is disgusting, and the wire harnesses are just coated in dirt. So I need to give this thing a huge vacuuming and wipe down to make it look nice in here again. And there's a couple more things I need to do in here as well, like this little back channel piece that the glass slides into has a big chip missing. So I need to replace that with a new one. And I removed the coin door because I saw that this little ground wire had broken off, and this goes to a little screw on the coin door, so I need to fix that as well. The coin door is actually pretty easy to remove. There's just a connector that you have to take out and then remove 4 screws where the hinge attaches, and this is where that ground wire is supposed to attach. You can see it was crimped right here and then just screwed into the metal coin door. And with the coin door out, it'll make it easier for me to clean up. Here's the playfield in all its glory, so you can get a better look at how it was assembled at the factory. And there's a few parts under here I want to replace, so it'll be easier to do that because the playfield is right here on the table. I can service it really easily. And I can tell that the design of this coin door is definitely pretty cost-cut compared to some of the older machines I've worked on because, for example, we have a completely toolless assembly for the coin rejectors. All you have to do is pull up on this little plastic here, and then it'll kind of pull forward like this, And then that'll allow you to just pull this right out. And the coin rejectors are made completely out of plastic. There is no metal except for some tiny little pieces throughout the whole thing. This is all plastic. And you can actually remove these little plastic clamping pieces pretty easily. They have a little spring here so that they can have tension and clamp on the coin rejectors, but there's also a little piece of plastic here that keeps them in when they're in the closed position like that. So all we have to do is just remove the spring, comes right off basically, and then put it in the open position, and it comes right out. And this coin door is actually not super complicated. It looks like to remove the individual coin returns, there's just 3 screws, and then you can just pull both of these out. And this little metal piece where the 3 buttons are, it's just got 2 screws holding it on. And the wiring just goes through little plastic things here, and they just have little adhesive pads that are attached to the coin door, and I can tell they're barely sticking anymore. So I might as well go ahead and replace those. The slam switch, of course, only has got 2 screws. It's held on like a regular switch. And the top part of the coin door, where you actually put the coins in, it looks like those 2 pieces are held on with only 3 screws also. So I think just removing those screws, I can take everything out of this coin door and give it a real nice clean. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so that is the entire coin door completely taken apart. As you can see, I've got it down to just the bare metal door. There's nothing else left on that. And if this machine were a clean machine, I probably wouldn't go this far, but this is one of the dirtiest ones I've had to work with, and you can see inside the actual metal part of the coin door how hairy and dusty and filthy it is. So I figured I'd just go all the way, take everything out, give it a nice clean, and make it look good again. And you can just see by these pieces here, you can see all the dirt and dust buildup that's on these. So everything here just needs a deep clean. You can see how filthy the coin return flaps are. And I'm going to replace the little adhesive pads that are underneath these plastic pieces for routing the wires. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of all of this and put it back together, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Well, hopefully that gives you a bit of a taste for how filthy the inside of this coin door was. And so I went through it and cleaned up all the rest of the pieces and screwed it back in the machine. And you can see now, it looks practically brand new, because all that filth is now completely gone. And I went ahead and replaced the little adhesive pads that were on the back of these plastic pieces that route the wires. So now those are going to hold on much better. And I even went as far as disassembling the coin rejectors themselves and taking out each individual piece just to make sure that when the quarters go through them, they go nicely and they don't get stuck. And I made sure that the coin return mechanism was nice and free. So that's working good now. Doesn't squeak, doesn't get stuck. It's all nice and fluid. Put a couple of LEDs in there, cleaned up the wire harness, and I fixed the ground connection problem down here. You can see I put a new crimp terminal on the end of it and screwed it back to the coin door. And the connection in here that hooks up to the ground wires in the machine, the wire was getting real brittle. It was barely hanging on. So I cut the bad part off and so I had to trim a little bit of this tubing down so I could get another crimp terminal on it and screw it in. Because originally they just had the screw going directly through the wire like they did here, and I didn't really want to do that again. I didn't want to potentially damage the wire by putting a screw through it, so I just put another crimp terminal on there, screwed it back in the hole, and so now we have a proper ground connection again. And if I go ahead and close the coin door, you can see that the wire is still long enough and it doesn't get caught in anything. Like, I can open the door fully. The wire is not too short. So that's all fixed. And so that is the coin door all fixed up on this game. But I'm not done with the coin door just yet. There's still one more thing that I want to do to it. So right here we have the 3 buttons that are used for resetting the high scores and for going through the game adjustments and tests. And there's a label here that shows you what each button does. And as you can see, it's looking pretty faded. The text is barely readable at this point. So what I want to do is replace this label with a new one, and I was able to find a recreation of it that I can print off on some sticky paper and replace this label so that it will be nice and vibrant again and that you can actually read it from a distance. So here's the old label that was on the coin door. You can see it's in pretty rough shape. So I want to replace it, and these are the ones that I just printed out. So I'm going to cut out one of those with a paper cutter and cut out the circles with an X-Acto knife. And this is on sticky paper, so I'll be able to just stick it right down. So I'll get that done, and I'll show you how it looks after that. And that is the new label. So I cut out 3 holes for the buttons to go through, and I stuck it right down back where the original one was. I used some Goo Gone on a magic eraser to get all the old adhesive off, and so the new label is stuck down on a nice clean metal surface, so it shouldn't ever become unstuck. And with that metal plate screwed back to the coin door, that is what that label looks like now. You can actually read it. And this is how it would have looked from the factory, so I think that looks a million times better. And so with that label replaced, this coin door is now completely finished. It's been all cleaned up and fixed. So now I want to move on to the underside of the cabinet. So I'm going to give you a good before shot for how this looks right now, because it's going to look totally different by the time I'm done. So here's what the underside of the cabinet looks like right now. I'm going to go a little bit closer in on the wire harnesses just so you can see how much dirt is caked in on those. That's got dirt all over it. That's got dirt all over it. And there's a bunch of dirt down in the coin box area. So that's what this looks like right now. I'm going to go ahead and get the vacuum and start going to town on this thing. So I've been taking care of some stuff underneath the playfield so I can get everything down here situated before it goes back in. First thing I did is I replaced the broken eject shield in that captive hole with a brand new one. And I did the same for the two eject shields where the visor kickouts are, because after looking at those, you can see they're cracked as well. So they were on their way to becoming that. So you can see the other one here is also cracked. So I replaced all those eject shields with brand new ones, and so now the ball isn't going to be falling through the holes anytime soon. I also went ahead and replaced the end of stroke switches on both of the flipper assemblies, and you can see that they've been rebuilt before. They have new coils, new crankshaft pieces, and the coil stop down here is also brand new, but they left the original end of stroke switches in it. And if you take a look at the switch, one of the switches that was in it, I think this one may be original to the machine. Look at how horrible that switch looks. It's not even flat anymore. And if I go ahead and bend it open, look at how terrible that looks. It's all black and burned up. And this was the switch that was on the left flipper. The right flipper switch, I can tell, is a replacement, but it also looked kind of bad. See, it's all crusty looking. So I replaced them both. And on this machine, for all the time I've had it, it had an intermittent problem where the left flipper would be very weak half the time, and it was absolutely because of that burned up end of stroke switch. So now both flipper assemblies have new switches, and the reason why those end of stroke switches were all burnt up is because when this assembly fires and opens up the end of stroke switch, there will be an arc that happens in that switch because there's solenoid voltage going through that. So what you can do, and what Williams did on later flipper assemblies, is they added a capacitor across the end of stroke switch blades, and that reduces the arcing going through those switches. And so I'm going to add those capacitors to these flipper assemblies so that the end of stroke switches will last longer and I won't have to replace them as often. And I've also been taking some of the loose labels that I found in the bottom of the machine and put them back where they're supposed to go, like these lamp designators that tell you what lamp to use. They were just sitting in the machine because the adhesive went bad, so I stuck those back down there with some double-sided tape. And there was another one up here I did the same to. I think it was this one. So I put those back where they're supposed to go. But what I'm working on right now is the visor assembly. I wanted to take that apart a little bit more so I could clean everything. And so the motor is mounted on this piece right here. And if you go ahead and remove those 4 screws, that will loosen this piece. And then you can take a look inside. You can see this is the motor right there. And it will spin and eventually close one of those 2 switches. And so one of them tells it that the visor's closed, and the other one tells it that it's open. And the way it closes them is that little metal peg right there. So you can see it's closing this switch right now. I went ahead and removed the target assembly as well. It's just held in by 3 screws that go into the wood right there. And these metal brackets stick through the assembly. And so when the targets move up and down, these will also move up and down. These are part of the whole assembly that lowers the targets and opens the visor. So that's how that works. Target assembly is right here. And there's multiple things I have to address with it. One, it's filthy. You can see old wax residue on the targets. And these targets have little bits of foam behind them. And that foam is degrading like crazy. So I need to replace the foam that's behind those targets. It basically acts as a dampener so they don't bend at an extreme degree. So I need to replace that, clean up this piece, and clean up the rest of the motor assembly under here, and then that should be good to go. So I want to replace the rear glass channel because it's got a big chip out of it missing. And so to remove it, underneath the foam that makes contact with the playfield, there are 4 screws that screw into this wood part of the cabinet, and then I should be able to just pull it out. It's kind of hard to get at those screws with the foam in the way, but I'm gonna replace it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Wow, it's dirty back there. Well, now I can clean all that off, plus I can wipe down the side glass channels before I put the new piece on so that the glass isn't sliding around in all that dirt. That's about more how it should look. So now we'll put on the new piece and we'll screw it on first and then put on the foam to make it easier. Well, I'm gonna have to make some new holes because as it turns out, they don't line up. All right, I drilled out the new holes. Originally it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes there, but PinBot, as you can see, it's only got 4 holes. And so I drilled out the 1, 2, 3, 4 holes using the old piece as my guide. Well, whoever drilled the holes in this thing in the factory didn't do the best job because 3 of them line up, but the one over here is higher. So I'm gonna have to drill a new hole in the cabinet. Or I can improvise so that I don't have to drill into the cabinet. I can just make the holes big like this, that way I have some room to move it up and down so that I can adjust it exactly for this machine. And I think this piece is for slightly later Williams machines because I'm looking at the one on my big guns, which came out a year after PinBot, and it looks exactly like this new piece. So this just must be a later version. It's got a slightly longer lip here on the bottom. But as long as I line the holes up, I think it'll work just fine in PinBot. Oh yeah, and I can see, just by looking at it, I have the 2 end screws kind of in there. This is flush now, so I should be able to screw it in and have no problems. Oh, look at that. That looks perfect. Right on. And before I do anything else, I'm going to do a quick test fit with the glass, just to make sure it slides in there. Perfect. It's exactly what I wanted it to do. So that is adjusted perfectly fine, and it should work in this game. Now I just need to put a new foam strip on the bottom of it. 20 1/4. All right, I got this all nice and cleaned up. You can see how much better that looks now. I replaced the little adhesive pad under this because the old one was falling off, and I put some new foam behind the targets so they don't bend. So this is all cleaned up now. But I had to do a little repair on where it actually screws in because the 2 edge holes stripped out to the point where the screws wouldn't tighten anymore. And that piece is kind of important to have aligned just right, or else it might not go down all the way. So what I did is I put little bits of toothpick in the hole and used some wood glue to secure them in. I did that on both edge holes. So now I should be able to screw the screws back in and have them tighten. And I went ahead and cleaned up the motor assembly as well. And it's actually kind of interesting how they implemented this, because the entire opening and closing of the visor and the moving of the target assembly is controlled by this one little piece on the motor here. So right now, the motor, I believe, is in the open position. And so when this moves around, that little part that sticks out will be moving in here. And so when it moves to the other side, that's what moves the target assembly. It just rubs against that little plastic bit. And the target assembly is connected to these arms here. And so when that moves up and down, these will also move up and down, and that will open the top visor piece. So they're doing 2 things with just this one little part that sticks out on the motor here. And this piece actually comes off. This is a little piece of plastic that they put around the metal part on the motor so that it slides easier, because it's plastic on plastic, so it doesn't need any lubrication. So that's how they implemented the motor mechanism on PinBot. All right, I got the visor assembly all taken care of, so now that is back together and looking nice and clean. And I also went ahead and added those capacitors across the end of stroke switches on the flippers, so now the switches should last a lot longer. PinBot didn't come with capacitors from the factory, so they didn't give you a spot to put them, so I just mounted them to the playfield with some adhesive strips, so those are not going to go anywhere. So I went ahead and changed out the lights under the playfield to LEDs of my choosing, and I gave it a good vacuuming, so now the playfield under here is looking really good. And so now the playfield is ready to go back in the machine, and I can start cleaning the top side of it. All right, the playfield is now back in, ready for me to clean up and restore. As you can see, I've pulled the machine out of its spot from back there, and that's because I wanted to get behind it so that I could get up there and take apart the topper assembly and clean all that out. And so you can see that looks really good now. That's the original topper, and it still looks that nice. But since I have the machine out and raised up on my hydraulic lift cart with the legs raised off the ground, I think now would be a great time to replace the legs with new ones because, as you can see, they look absolutely awful. And I don't think that's rust. Someone tried to do something to them. I don't know if they sanded it or what, but the finish is really bad, and they all kind of look like that, either on the outside or the inside. You can see the one back there is not looking too great either. So I'm going to replace the legs, and that'll look a whole lot better. And then after that, we can start doing the playfield. Now that looks more like it. New legs and new leg levelers on all four of the corners. So now this machine is looking great in terms of the legs. So now I can go ahead and put it back in its spot, and we can continue working on it. So at this point, the only thing we have left to do with this machine is clean up and restore the playfield. And this playfield's pretty disgusting as it is. You can see all the dirt that's on it. So let's go ahead and get this thing all cleaned up and make it look a million times better. And here's the color scheme that I went with for the LEDs on top of the playfield. I've got all blue on the left side and all red on the right side. It kind of fits the blue and red theme for Pinbot. And this is what I did on the Pinbot that I used to have. So it's cool seeing it look like this now. And I went ahead and changed out the LEDs underneath the playfield to be brand new non-ghosting LEDs that I color matched to the light lenses. So I think it looks very good. And one thing I also did up here when I was cleaning the playfield off is I replaced the little foam dampeners behind the stand-up targets because the original foam was very close to wanting to degrade. So those 5 targets, the advanced planet target, and the energy value target all have new foam dampeners behind them now, so those aren't going to degrade. And here's another thing to keep a lookout for when you're refurbishing a pinball machine. These are called the flipper return frames, and those are what the ball will roll against when it goes down the in lane and back to the flipper. They're mounted like right here. And what can happen with them over time, and what's happened to these, is right in this area, you can see they've worn down quite a bit. They're no longer flat. You can see how much wear there is on this one. And that's just from the ball rolling across them for so many years. But what happens when they wear down like that is the flipper return frames are supposed to be aligned perfectly with the flipper so that when the ball goes down the lane, it'll glide nice and smooth onto the top of the flipper. But when they're worn down, the ball will kind of hit the flipper right here and it'll hop like that. It'll go down and hop. And that makes it so that your flipper doesn't have as much power when it shoots the ball, because instead of the ball being right on the flipper, it's just a little bit above it because it hopped off. So what I did is I bought some brand new flipper return frames. There's one of them right there from Cliffy's Pinball Protectors. He sells flipper return frames for a lot of older Williams and Bally machines. And so I bought the set for the Pinbot. And so now when the ball goes through either of the in lanes, it's going to roll down and it's just going to slide right on top of the flipper and not hop. So you'll have the most powerful shot when the ball comes back to the flippers. So the only thing left to do now on this machine is to just give it one more cursory vacuum, get all the little dust that's fallen onto it off, vacuum up all the parts again, and then we are ready to reassemble it. So let's go ahead and finish this machine off. And so that is the restoration series for this Williams PinBot pinball machine from 1986. And this year happens to be PinBot's 40th anniversary, so it was very fitting for me to restore this machine this year. And it turned out great. It's all cleaned up. Everything looks practically brand new. It plays really well. So that is another machine restored. I'm going to include some gameplay footage at the end of the video if you're interested in that. So thanks for watching. I see you, and I will see you in my next video.